Thank you for having me, Church of the Holy City. Appreciate it so much. So I wanted just to step in a little bit before I start my sermon and just tell you, if it's okay, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what sparks my heart. Is that okay? Okay, great. So, we're sitting here and these beautiful angels in the church and this online community as well as people in the church. And I just want to tell you, as Rich Taffel works in social entrepreneurship, it's really interesting because I've been in that field for about 40 years. Currently, I have been working in social impact farms and how we can support our local food systems to transformational spaces and support peace, health, environment, and technology to connect education systems and future generations. I'm a student at the Center for Swedenborgian Studies. Like Rich told you, I'm in the ordination track, but I'm also in the doctorate of ministry, and I'm focused on infrastructure. I'm really interested on where we're headed. What are we doing? What are we doing for future generations? And one of the things that breaks my heart is the children's ears listening from a space of who they're hearing today. And we as adults, I think we take some part in that. So my topic of how we really look at that, I did a master's at the Franciscan School of Theology and Multicultural Pastoral degree. And right after that, I started up with the TORCH. And the acronym for that is TORCH, the Organization for Realizing Change in Humanity. And as I looked at it and the impact, I started teaching spiritual practices online. And people from Pakistan saw me, and that's how I infiltrated this work out of Pakistan. So it's all in God's divine moment. We're at 6 years in of designing and engaging as a social impact connectional system. It's a new operating system for the 21st century, and I literally went all over Pakistan. I had one lecture set up, and in that one lecture, I lectured in 12 major cities in 12 days. So something happened, right? Something happens to us when we're called in. And I think that's the gift. We're really hoping to support future generations in living towards the dream of a one peaceful world. I have had that pilot program out of Pakistan, and we've grown from 100 orphans on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, and that grew into 25,000 children the next year, and that grew into 55,000 kids in low-income schools in Pakistan, including a senator that wanted to put it all the way across the country. So TORCH kind of took its mark into that work. So I'm excited to be here with you. I'm a mother of 5, a grandmother of 7, so that's a huge part of who I am. And I just want to start with a little prayer before I start my sermon, okay? So let's just, again, Rich calls us in to breathe, but let's just step in again. And you heard a little bit about my heart. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reading, Roxanne. Beloved ones, we stand here. We ask to be planted where our feet are, to feel this earthly body, to engage with one another, and for you to lead us, to support our hearts with love. I picked the topic, Bloom Where Your Feet Are Planted. And I've been pondering this all week, and I have to be honest, it's been a really a lovely moment, because I've seen Rich and I've seen others preach here or speak here, whatever he's got going on, I'm loving it, and I really appreciate you all being here tonight. I love gardens, so I love to get my hands dirty, and Ian and I, my husband and I, bought a farm. And I've been planting seeds for the first time in a while because I was in California and I was in the buzz of that startup. Startup of TORCH took a lot of time, and also doing my Masters of Divinity. As a good American, I Googled the term bloom. Where are my feet planted? Google states, the lovely inspiring quote, "Bloom where you are planted," was accredited to Saint Francis de Sales, who lived in the 1500s to 1600s. This quote brings to mind the picture of a beautiful bloom But what it implies is a situation that is difficult and requires grit, which I really want you to remember. It requires surrendering, and it requires gratitude. So step into that for a minute. Francis de Sales also says, true charity has no limit. For the love of God has been poured into our hearts by his Spirit, dwelling in each of us, calling us to life of devotion, and inviting us to bloom in the garden, where he has planted and directed us to radiate that beauty and spread the fragrance of his providence. To bloom where our feet are planted has so many meanings. And through this Lenten season, as I look up to the angels, there's many seasons. I want to remind us that understanding this world's suffering, we're all experiencing it. We're all in engagement of conscious leadership. I know Rich has been reading this book with you as a community, and we go hand in hand. And I think it's our time where we're needed to bloom. I think it's a really important time where we have to step up. So within a seed, a deep influx, Emanuel Swedenborg shares that divine is necessary, an acknowledgement that the Lord administers all things. Within a seed, a deep influx of God's love bursts up and out of the ground. It emerges through the dark soil, pushes its way to the light, and we're always asked for internal and external changes through the seasons. The seasons of the year make up the earth and renew areas in each season for us. And I just want to share a poem by one of my favorite theologians, John Philip Newell. For everything that emerges from the earth, thanks be to you, O God. Holy root of being, sacred sap that rises, full-bodied fragrance of earth's unfolding form. May we know that we are of you. May we know that we are yours. May we know that we are one with you, together one. Guide us as nations to what is deepest. Open us as peoples to what is first. Lead us as a world to what is dearest. That we know the holiness of wholeness. That we learn the strength of humility. That together we may live close to the earth and grow in a grounded glory. So he's rooting us in this idea of prayer with earth, and I think it's a really important piece. It's a time to reflect, a time for deeper look, and as many of us know, the environment and all that deeper look is possibly hidden in our own souls. Where is our personal environment? In the past, I embraced Lenten season each year with Candlemas Day. And in my own way of understanding the darkness of winter, I took moments with my kids. I homeschooled. I started a ceremony at our home every February 2nd and gathered people to make beeswax candles and know that the spring was not too far. It was a time to start planting seeds, a time to engage thinking in what the garden may look like. And the excitement in the kids as a seed popped up under the lights in our basement was this excitement and a spark. There was something new that emerges the seed and it pops up through the ground. Many of us call February 2nd Groundhog's Day. That's the traditional day. You know, it's when the day gets longer, right? They're gonna see. The groundhog had to see his shadow or not. Interesting statement in the discussion of conscious leadership. As we see a lot emerging with a bit more sun here in the USA, the winter winds reawakens us. The seeds have long awaited to start to pop through the dark. We are like the seasons ourselves. Our readings of the word may have sparked something in you today, and I appreciate you listening. This past week, my sermon completely changed because a good friend died. Her name was Diana. And to pick a scripture, her children asked me, they call me Mama Lynn, and they asked me to pick a sermon for her. I was supposed to fly down to go to the celebration of her life, of her passing. And I pondered for just a very quick snap, and immediately Ecclesiastes 3:1-8 came. There's a time for everything, a season under heaven. And I want to tell you a little bit about Diana, and I'm not going to read you all of Ecclesiastes today just because of time, but you know, there's a time to be born and a time to die, right? But what Diana really dealt with is multiple sclerosis. She got multiple sclerosis after her 5th child. I have to share with you a little bit because that reading I was supposed to read in Florida this week. And due to circumstances, I couldn't go. So this is kind of what happened. As the days became closer and I couldn't attend in person, only online, feelings of guilt came over me, feelings of sadness. She's a good friend. Feelings of loss, feelings not to share her celebration. As I watched online, her first grandchild came up and read Ecclesiastes 3:1-8. And I just broke out crying because for me, it was all meant to be. It was that moment of my seed that was in the dark came up and it popped up and there she was and it was perfect. I had never met her granddaughter. So the grace appeared. I say that often. You know, as my guilt, my sadness, my loss all turned into joy at that moment, I really believe that we're in this moment all the time right now. You know, we look at Jason overseas. Thank you, Jason, for your good works. We look at people in our communities and the celebrations, getting into Yale. You know, there's miracles and there's underground all the time. We tend to move in that. In our reading of John today, he reminds us that we're already clean. And we're not, when, that when we are not able to bloom, a bit of pruning is needed. We need to be given this grace often. As a friend told me long ago, the more time we spend with God, God spends with us. Just a couple more words about Diana. Out of her life, she stayed steadfast with the scripture. We read today, she was pretty much underground with her multiple sclerosis in many ways, but you'd never know it if you met her. She always stayed connected to that vine that John reminds us, to stay connected to the branches. We are the branches of the vine, but the roots that we come from in the community that we're in at any given time, it's a connection between that community. Her multiple sclerosis lasted for years. She had multiple surgeries, and so many of the moments the girls would call me and say, Mama Lynn, pray. And I'd pray. And I walked through many years with Diana personally coming to me. So we have these relationships in our lives. We have somebody that might be going through something, but other people don't quite go deeper within that community of people. In church, we tend to go deep with each other. We get to know each other. And I love how Rich is opening this community and opening that heart. She always stayed connected. But I have to say, I was there when she lost her first leg. She couldn't run with the kids anymore. She lost her second leg and she was in a wheelchair. And it was really hard when she lost both her arms and she couldn't feed herself. Diana loved food. So I was always calling, and again, that feeling of shame, because my own issues I wanted to share, but there was something so rich that she brought me up through that soil all the time. She was so magnificent in that struggle that God sometimes calls us to. We're going through it as a community, and I have to say that the more time and the more struggles, the less and less I had spoken to her over the years. And a couple weeks ago, I got to talk to her, and I'm so grateful. But she knew Jesus. We could talk for hours. She loved Jesus like so intensely. My extreme heartache of not being there in Florida turned into another miracle. The girls asked me Saturday to officiate her celebration at the farm where she and I had met. In July this year, I accepted. This is the place where she and I ran in the hills and slid down the hills and played. And she was the one to teach me as a mother to play. And so I have to be honest, she was the foundation of my mothering in such a rich way. So Emanuel Swedenborg, when I think about conscious leadership, he led us in a lot of different areas. I've been reading him a lot in school, but Diana led me. The school here in this church, it's a type of community that's a school, it's a presence. I used to have a lot of dreams about that we're in school all the time in a spiritual lesson. And he says, it is the Lord within each one of us that leads us and reconciles places where we need to be pruned. There's certain places we have to just stop and surrender. So I want to put that out, that so many people that we do not know when we need to get pruned, but once it happens, we kind of know inside internally that person had actually pruned us, right? There's something in each of us that kind of touches that. So when I go back to the garden, I love to get my hands dirty. Life gets messy too. And I'm so clear that when I'm in the garden, I find order. I find a foundation for myself. I find a place within myself. And there's something about that, Swedenborg's writing on regeneration. He talks about our own generation. I loved what he states about plants and the plant's soul. He says, the plant's prolific essence, which is dominant at the innermost level within every drop of sap, comes from no other source than the head of the spiritual world, because this heat originates in the spiritual sun. Its constant goal is to generate new life and therefore ensure that creation continues. When talking about conscious leadership and understanding how to stay in the authentic leadership of my life as an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur for 40 years. We want to be engaged in regeneration all the time as an entrepreneur. It's just the way it is. And in community, no matter where we are, whether you're in school, whether you're in a job, that community, we're always in regeneration. It just does it. Wherever we are, we're planted. We are bloomed. We are either under the soil, or we're maybe popping up, or maybe in full bloom. We never know. And I think when I think about blooming, in Arcana, he says, Swedenborg says in 1055, Arcana Celestia, the whole world, the whole of heaven rests on love as its foundation. If we look at the word love, it's a place that we can feel. We can all say, many times we've all taken a moment of love. We take a moment to love one another. We can even say that we were planted there at times. But when life changes for any one of us, the challenging times are difficult. Love is so hard. Love is a foundation, I think, for these places that we bloom, but it also engages the way of love to stay on top. Swedenborg states celestial heights is really where we get a lot from, right? From our Lord. Love seems easy when we're in a good place, but what is the truth and good of love when we stand in the teachings of our own struggles? He says, the spiritual man acknowledges spiritual and celestial truth and good. He does so much from love as from faith, which is the basis of his actions. The celestial man believes and perceives spiritual and celestial truth and good, and does not acknowledge any other faith in that which it stems from love. It's our basis of action. It's the action in the world. It's our action within our communities. Our own free will, he said, restricts us at times. And we all kind of know that time when we don't feel part of. The Lord of his kingdom and a person that bonds us together, he states, gives us freedom. It's a bond within each other. It's a bond that, we have this beautiful moment to be with Jason from Ukraine. It stepped us in, right? It dropped us into our own hearts. It stepped us in when somebody celebrated getting into Yale. You know, the word love seems to be a place that we can feel, but the spiritual sun at many times has to be felt. And for me, I have to drop in. And I drop in through getting to know all of you. It's an important piece. So if my feet are planted and connected, like our reading of John, God remains in us and we remain in God. A branch cannot bear fruit all by itself. We must stay true to the vine. Regeneration helps us. Yet if we stray too far and break away from the spiritual sun, God, we must be willing to take time to repair, to replenish, to water our own roots, to find our own inner action. Living and arising from our true vine takes, at least for me, a time to be vulnerable, a time to be supported, a time to ask, a time to engage in humility, much of the time. When we make a commitment and see how we need to commit, there's got to be a willingness. And the book that I know Rich has pointed your way, Conscious Leadership, I got reading a little bit about the authentic leadership and in practicing integrity. I love this on page 165. So if any of you have that book, it's pretty cool. But it talks about emotional intelligence, which I know Rich took you on a journey a couple weeks ago. It says, have I felt all my feelings? It talks about conscious communication. Is there anything I'm withholding? I don't want to withhold from you today, even though I'm in practice, right? I want to be my authentic self. The impeccable agreements, it states. Do I have any unkept secrets in my agreements? Healthy responsibility. Am I blaming or am I feeling a victim? These commitments to action are about that action of love that Swedenborg talks us. To be where our feet bloom and how we engage the world is not an easy task. To be fully in divine love, we may need to take some steps to take these type of inventories with God, with a loved one, or those involved with any one of us at any given time. There might be a stranger in the street. We want to put a prayer out to Russell, because I think that's one of the friends here that we could pray for. To know what we are involved in consciousness every day and to build a strong leadership, it takes moments to reflect into places of our heart, in places of our minds, and to take a breath. And the Greek word for ecstatic or ecstasis is being out of oneself. We mostly engage in our brokenness to our own loops. We all have these loops. And at times, we make our own disagreements within ourselves. To deepen our actions of love, it might take spiritual practices, might take community practices to deepen our heart and to keep us connected to our own feet. I do not know about you, but to bloom where your feet are planted touches the spirit of this entrepreneur. I'm usually ahead of myself. I tend to have to take a stop, say a prayer, meditate, and then just maybe I can hear a bit more to support my day-to-day living. What happens when the flower blooms? Have you ever know flowers? They bloom, but they disappear pretty quick. They die quickly. So maybe life's just that. Maybe we bloom in just short snippets. We bloom into the full flower and then we take a moment and we go underground. Those seeds are planted within each one of us. Love is an action. It's an internal understanding. Swedenborg talks about consciousness. He talks about the internal bonds of that spiritual man. And I have to say the perception of understanding those bonds go deep for each one of us as we meet. The spiritual truth is internal and external. What I believe in the Arcana 3941, he says, the goods of faith, spiritual and natural, as distinguished, the goods of faith, spiritual and natural, as distinguished from the goods of love. He says the spiritual man acknowledges spiritual and celestial truth and good. So as we walk as brothers and sisters, we do not have to do this alone. Our branches are kind of long lines and we kind of stretch way out there at times, but if we keep that connection, we can embody our community seen and unseen. Jesus took a lot of time in the wilderness. He took a lot of time to reason. He spent time in the darker places of thought, time for his own reconciliation and time from his heart. Receptivity and attunement toward the good, attunement to the light. The elements in nature can always kind of bring that. So I'll end my message with saying, life gets messy. Life gives us a time to remember, but at times we need each other to remind us to remember that we are loved. It's Lenten season, and it's a season of new life and new growth. And I hope at times when you're in that other place, remember that season is upon us, that Jesus shared a lot of suffering. We go through these seasons ourselves. We share in a rich community of faith, and we also go through the blooming period. I want you to take a sweet breath. And so I have one little practice, if you don't mind. I hope there's time. But I want you to close your eyes just for a minute. Take a breath. And I want you to start breathing in and out of your mouth just for a few minutes. You can breathe in your mouth and out your nose. When you breathe in, I want you to start tasting your breath. It's a sweet breath that God gave us. It's called the living breath. We'll just take a couple more minutes to breathe together. We breathe in. Through our mouth, you can taste the sweetness in your breath. So if you're feeling that time, at any time, take a sweet breath, take a moment, and take a place where your feet are bloom and where they're planted. Tap your feet on the ground for a minute. Step in, realize that those feet are worthy of all that you've ever done and you ever shall be. Blessed be to God. Thank you.